Hello everyone and welcome to the Navin Times Talk from the Heart. There is more to Goa than just the beaches and the party scene. Our traditional colonial era built heritage is unique. It has a vibrancy of its own. It is beautiful, it is intricate and also very artistic. However, it has been often misrepresented and also misunderstood. To understand more about our architecture, to appreciate it better, and to understand what we can do to, to retain it, we have with us architect Manguesh Prabhugaonker. Manguesh has been in practice last 27 years. His resume is very impressive, and I'm going to read out a little bit about him. So Manguesh Prabhugaonker has 27 years of varied experience in the fields of architecture and landscape architecture, planning and design. He has instituted several initiatives in the field of architectural education and professional practice codes in India. He is a National Council member of the Indian Institute of Architects and chairman of the Real Estate and Housing Committee at the Goa Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is involved with the formulation of RERA regulations in Goa. It is such a pleasure to be speaking with Manguesh Prabhugaonker. Hello Manguesh, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
We are so happy to have you on our show because we have so many questions about the architecture.
Yeah.
Most of us see Goan architecture and we just take it in our stride. We don't really appreciate its value. So Manguesh, there are different cultural, architecture and the designs that are there. Most of it, we see it in Fontenay, and we look at it and just say, beautiful, lovely. But there is more to it. Can you tell us a little history about these homes, the architecture, the design? Can you do that?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, see, Goa has been always known for its architectural heritage. And the kind of branding which has happened over last maybe decades has been exploited very well in terms of tourism models or revenue generating models. But it's very important for us, especially the policy makers in Goa today, to understand the significance of these typologies which have been built over a period of years. Like example, if you go to see and analyze the kind of architectural heritage in Goa that exists, on one side we have the residential category where you have range of houses,
yes,
palatial houses, even a small scale house of a community. Then you have maybe institutional places which have been built, and also there have been some places which are with religious context, like culturally they are very rich.
Right.
So right now they are there spread across right from coastal belt of Goa up to the hinterlands. Not only Bardes, Salsette and Tiswadi. So it's very important to understand how this entire significance happened. And if you go to see the historic connections of the past, maybe 500 years or even earlier, you will realize that the motto of behind this entire thing was the sustainability. Most of those houses were self-dependent on their own, especially climate responsive. The elements like the veranda, the balcony, the courtyard for its cooling effect, the backyard, at the foothills. So there was some kind of science in a methodological way which was applied in all those houses. Even in terms of the kind of materials they used, kind of sloping roofs they used.
True.
So there were a lot of technical stuff which went into even construction practices. And I think somehow, if you see that entire historic era of the past, you will realize that some of those buildings or structures have aged, like even a human body after a certain particular time ages out, right? So it's very important for us to relook at the basic evolution of how all those houses existed and what they are going through. It's not only a house that we should look at when we look at architectural heritage of Goa. Even a street along a ward or a hamlet is also a part of heritage. Even a water body aligning or a foreground opposite any religious place like a church or a temple is also part of heritage.
So it encompasses the environment and its surroundings. It is
Yes.
not just this individual entity which is there.
Yes.
There are so many other factors
yes.
to it.
It has to go beyond just the cosmetic elevation that you see
Right.
globally. There are a lot of other factors, the kind of openings you do, kind of doors you do, kind of shell windows that they existed in the past, kind of patra chajjas they did, kind of courtyards. And one of the major elements which existed in the past, if you have noticed, if you have observed in the past, you will realize that these houses were revolving around structure of a joint family. So the entire build form in architectural typology had a joint family within all this. But in today's date, you will realize that a house has undergone a change, and that is what maybe I can share about it later. How the house of family of 4 or 10, maybe 50 years back, has become house of maybe 50 or 100. And that is where there is pressure on this architectural typology to growing horizontally in terms of extension, because there are families which have multiplied, siblings have come, kids want a special room, or attached washrooms have to be accommodated. So many points like this. The occupation has also changed. The newer lifestyles have come in of so-called, air conditioning, attached toilets, partitioned walls, siblings having,
their own
compartmentalized rooms.
Yes.
So many things like this. So because of that, what happens? It becomes very difficult to, repeat or redevelop the same thing all over again. What was existing 50 years back,
Yes.
right? So one of the point is that also, but it's very interesting to see all the architectural languages of the past, how they were socially interconnected. Like you must have seen in every vado or village hamlet, it was a start of a village and end of a village. You start at maybe some kind of foreground opposite a church or a temple,
Yes.
and then the street continues up to maybe end of a cemetery or end of a water body or up the hill. And every house, residential, was basically opening out on that particular street, like a courtyard, or maybe not a courtyard, maybe a balcony would interact with them. People are passing along those streets, people could interact.
Right.
And there were streets which are as tiny as 3 meter or 4 meter. So everybody even interacted during religious processions are there, or feast is happening. So the entire spine also gets activated, and that becomes in a larger context or heritage language, which made what Goa is today also.
So basically what you are saying is that the architecture of old was very conducive to human relationships. It encouraged people to speak to each other. Unlike today, where we live in apartments and we don't even know sometimes, not always, we don't even know who our neighbors are. We move in and out of our apartments, we lock it, we go out, and we are out the whole day, we come back, we are in our apartment. Sometimes we don't know. So basically what you're saying is the community spirit was very much alive, and the architecture fueled that.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes, yes. If I compare what you're saying in terms of my grandfather's Goa and my grandchild's Goa, if you connect the entire history, you will realize there is a huge transformation.
It is.
And there is an immediate need to review something like this with forums like this.
You said your grandfather's home. Where is that?
Our place was in Bicholim earlier.
How? Let's take an example. Manguesh, you said that change is happening. It has to happen. There's no way you can dodge that. But how is Bicholi changed? Bicholi also has some heritage homes,
Yes.
right? More in the Hindu style. Is that right?
Yes.
So how has that changed from your grandfather's home? Has that changed a lot today?
Yes, I would say that not only in Bicholim but across the world also, or I'm talking about Goa in particular. Family of 4 has become family of maybe
Yes.
100 or 50. House which was ground floor or single story, there is a pressure on that house to make it ground plus 7 because of the family which is multiplied. And that's the kind of change which has gone through. And that language you can see in the entire streetscapes of Goa, right? Earlier the street was like you may be passing through a small lane of 4 meter and there were houses which were talking to each other. But in today's date, first thing what you do is when you make a house,
build a boundary
you
wall.
build a 4-meter wall, compound wall, and you're like, please don't see me. Complete privacy or safety, whatever that place has gone through.
No, but correct me if I'm wrong, and there are people out there who I'm sure will agree with me. Today it is not just about privacy, it is also about encroachment. There are people who are there everywhere, and with the new rules and laws, they say this is mine, this belongs to me. So the first thing anyone would tell you, this is what I've heard, is that build your boundary wall. Forget building the house, forget building anything. The boundary wall has to come up or somebody is going to encroach. So the circumstances also have forced us to do that, right, Mangesh?
Yes. In this context, there's a very important point about land ownership.
Yes.
If you see land ownership in Goa, it has got various permutations and combinations. Maybe initially it was on one particular person's name, but in today's date there are multiple owners through siblings and things like that. And some of them are not able to be in Goa because of some reasons. Maybe they are traveling globally, either in India or somewhere else, right? So that is one part. And second part, you will also realize that some houses are on rent also. So there's always a issue which we need to discuss also in the long run at various forums through platforms like this, where the rent which has been given is like maybe in 100 or 500 rupees kind
this
of
was
thing.
the old traditional
Yes.
rents that they were giving, and this has continued.
Right.
Yes.
So even if the landlord wants to develop his old house which is deteriorated or collapsing, he is not able to do with the kind of revenue which is coming in. So what he does is, he waits for house to collapse and then part ways with the kind of tenant or whoever is staying, or vice versa. So there are very interesting, legal aspects also linked to the land ownership in this case.
Yes.
Number one.
Yes.
And number two, of course, when the owner is not himself directly staying in the house, he's always worried about the safety of the property in terms of encroachments, as you rightly said. Many of the conservation property zones have houses. They are undergoing continuous change. And when you build any house in any conservation area, you will realize that you have to follow a procedure wherein you go to town planning department, you go to PDAs, then you go to there's something called conservation committee which approves whether the character of the house or proposal is most appropriate for that area or not.
Right.
Like if you're building in Fontanish or Ibandar, you'll realize that you need to build and follow certain typology, certain colors, certain textures, certain heights, certain elements of maybe balcony, railing, shell windows, colors. But you'll realize that very often the masses in particular, or there are some elements also in the building industry, don't follow this process. And then eventually they do something in the name of repair licenses at either panchayat level or on their own capacity, right? So a lot of things are happening without involving the authorities which approve. So this is something which we need to look at. There is a need for doing an audit of what's happening also in the name of repair work. And owners or the main landlord knows that such kind of things are happening. And it is due to one of this kind of reasons that safety of boundary is something which he always, gets prime importance.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the thing.
What you were speaking about reminded me about the case, the old Goa Heritage home, where there was so much happening, and Goa, the Goans were all up in arms because we wanted to protect that. So that was just one incident. But we see many incidents all around us where we actually need to take a step. But where to start becomes a problem. Now, for example, Mangesh just spoke about Ribanda. I am from Ribanda, and when he spoke about that, in Ribanda you need to take special permissions. Are these only for the old homes? Are they for the new buildings? Because there are buildings mushrooming all over Ribanda, and of course it's an eyesore. Because it used to be a beautiful, very beautiful village, very serene, verdant, no longer though. So is this what you're saying, only for exclusively for homes in old houses, the rules that you're speaking about?
No, in fact, post 1961, when major regulations and authorities were getting together, it took us, I think, almost around 20 years to put the town planning department in place. And it continued for a while, where they were looking after all these approval procedures across Goa.
Right.
Professor Edgar Ribeiro, my director in SPA, School of Planning and Architecture, was associated with that. Then I think they were looking after entire town planning acts. But it was somewhere in 80s when late architect Sarto Almeida from Margao also came into picture, and he initiated a need for something called conservation committee. And this conservation committee, was supposed to be looking after all the heritage zones of Goa. And that got demarcated, especially in this couple of talukas like Salset, Tiswadi or Bardes. They identified in the entire regional plan that this zone is completely like this is the Fontainis,
yes,
this is Ribanda, this is, so and so. So now henceforth, whatever you want to develop in these conservation zone areas, those houses come under purview of this particular conservation committee, which looks after, the change which is happening, whether it is coming in the right direction. Like in Delhi, if you go to see, there is something called Urban Art Commission. Whatever happens in Delhi, they will follow and see that it is blending with the central Delhi. The proposed change in Delhi cannot be like the glass house of Gurgaon.
Mm-hmm.
So the role of this conservation committee, which is doing a fantastic job with full of technical experts there right now, is basically to look after all these houses. So whatever comes beyond conservation zone, right, that comes under vernacular category, okay, and which is not notified in this particular regional plan. So yes, as you rightly asked, houses within conservation zone come under this permission, bracket, and others come under town planning.
Okay.
But you must have seen most of the coastal belt, which is under, pressures of tourism, pressures of hospitality, gets into all these procedures because there are paperworks involved. But if you go deeper inside, across the paddy fields and towards hinterlands of Goa, where mining and all dictates, where traditional artisans still exist and they build their own houses.
Right.
Concept of, hiring a consultant, the architect, the engineer somehow is not there.
Not there.
It is a traditional artisan, traditional carpenter, traditional mason who built, most of the heritage vernacular houses with their expertise. And kind of knowledge they have is amazing. If you go to see. Kind of joinery of lime, jaggery, lime plaster, only they could do it, kind of truss. But in today's date, you will not see similar kind of artisans existing in those areas.
Right.
So there are maybe, I can say, at least 30 to 40% of areas in Goa along the Western Ghats, along the hinterlands, who still practice architecture also, but it is done by a lot of artisans. Of course, we do guide them, but there are a lot of families who get into approaching the masons and carpenters who are traditionally rich with technical knowledge. And those are the ones who shape our architectural heritage, right? Orientation to sun early morning.
Yes.
The Tulsi garden outside where it should be, whether it is a procession which will go along, from church to the so-and-so or a temple to so-and-so, the deity is moving. You will orient the Tulsi garden based on that, right? The procession of Ganesh immersion or way of the cross or the courtyard or the front yard of my place, or sometimes it is community based, like he is a farmer or he is a fishing community based person, or he is any other exclusive artisan, like maybe working on gold, working on maybe any other traditional wood or any other material. You realize that they all have their lifestyle integrated into the house. The backyard will speak of this pre-monsoon shopping that they do from Friday market kind of thing in Mapsa or any other place.
Sure.
Where you have like you used to never shop for 4 months of rain.
Yes.
Stock your dry fish and things like that. So there were a lot of cultural and social customs which existed in their lifestyle which were there, and that you see in all those places. But somehow I think there has been a change which is happening. So that part of the sector of 30 to 40% in today's date also somehow is being built by traditional artisans, which need guidance from our side, because the generation is also going off the entire radar. the new generation somehow is not trained. And that is what something maybe we can look at through forums like this, through your organization, where a message is to go that the skills that are developed of developing architectural heritage of the past, how do you build 40 centimeter wall, how do you work on a laterite stone, how do you mix lime, how do you use varied proportions to make all this, how do the tongue and groove of the roof with wood or timber be made, how do you work on red oxide flooring, which was the entity of the past, the mosaic flooring, the plinth protection, the railing. But somehow there's nobody who can teach them, because they are no more either they have passed away, or is health wise is not able to transfer his knowledge. So I think it is a message from maybe a forum like this, where maybe even the varied policy makers can start some kind of vocational courses also, where our local younger generations which are
can learn.
They have something like ITI and industrial training, but they are focused with industry based training, but nothing to do with Goa's architectural heritage based training. You need to teach and emerge with new masons, new artisans, new people who will work on shell windows. Today's date for shell windows, I have to go to Calcutta and buy a shell. Wood I cannot use because it's not available, or it is because of costing I cannot do it. So people end up putting steel. People end up putting not put Mangalore tiles also, because either you don't get anybody for pre-monsoon cleaning.
Yes.
There is a method to walk even on top of the roof pre-monsoon,
True.
which normal person may not.
So there are basically a lot of challenges that the old people, the artisans of old are facing today. It is not just this or just this. There are so many that create a problem. So like you, Manguesh has been saying, he's been very kind. If you've been listening, he has said forums like this, and he has been complimenting us, and I'm so happy to take those compliments, and thank you very much, Manguesh. I also take this opportunity to tell you that we have been doing our best to ensure that knowledge is passed. We share ideas, knowledge, and also meet exciting people like Manguesh on the way. So thank you, Manguesh, again for all the compliments, and we are going to even work harder now that you have said that we have to train our youth. If our heritage, architectural heritage, has to be handed over to the younger generation, we need to work at it now. So if the policymakers are watching, I think you need to do something, and we're always there to help you. Right, Manguesh?
Yeah.
Now, Manguesh, you said that there are certain places that have been, that have this kind of architecture. So, besides Shandor, I'm sure you agree with me, Shandor, a little bit of Raya, I think, and Lotoli. Where else can we see these old homes? They are so beautiful. Where else? Which are the places, villages that I would be able to see them?
See, when you define Goa's architectural heritage, I'm running across the entire timeline maybe of 500 years more.
Wow.
Right? And you'll realize that different eras practice different kinds of architectural practices.
Right.
Different kinds of architectural languages in terms of form. There were some houses which are street facing.
Yes.
And there was a foothill behind. There were some houses which are courtyard based. They were dead to the street. Everything was within a courtyard, right?
Yeah.
Their entire family could come out. And there were some which were like the backyard, which was full of maybe the fruit garden, herbs, medicinal plants, what was needed. It was like a pharmacy for the house. Right? So in residential sector, you will find this kind of language which is there across, not only maybe among these three towns, because it is notified in the outline development plan of the TCP. But beyond that also there are several houses which are in the name of vernacular forms.
Okay. Which are those? Can you tell us?
Which have not got documented.
Right.
And that needs a documentation or listing in terms of authorities also taking a note. But one of the biggest danger in this notifying is people think that it is going to be under control and I may not be able to do anything in the long run. So there are pressures on them also. right? But I agree with your point, about like you asked me where they are and what do you see, I mean which areas do you see. If you see all our panchayats, I think more than 170 of them, there is a hierarchy of architectural heritage which moves from a palatial house
Yes.
to a small farmer's community house.
Okay, so let me clarify. I have a very limited view of the old houses, the colonial style houses. So what I'm basically speaking about are the beautiful blue and the yellows and the green colors that we see with the shell windows. Now that is my idea, do forgive me, but that is what I look at as the colonial era heritage homes. So you're saying that is just one part of it. There is so much more. We are learning. Yes, Mangesh, please go ahead.
If you go to see post 1967, and especially 70s, when tourism started, looking at Goa on a global map, the players who were into branding Goa always basically, I think, emphasized on the coastal belt, sea sand kind of area, or the talukas which were featured more towards the western waterfront. But you see, all those places are getting oversaturated now.
Oh dear,
Nobody, even a resident in Panjim or Goa, doesn't want to be along the coastal belt. For a weekend, he wants to go in the hinterland.
Absolutely.
And that is a kind of trend which is coming in now, to go and explore the hinterlands also.
True.
And that is where resilient design in architecture comes into. Sustainability comes into picture. Everybody talks about, I will create the sustainable models for Goa, or the resilient, or the climate change. But most of these forums, I would say critically, that these are more of fashionable statements that everybody makes. In reality, what is sustainability? And that is the question that we have. If you go along the hinterlands, you will realize that there are houses which are appropriately designed or well equipped with concepts of sustainability. The kind of roof overhangs, the thick walls,
and the local material.
no local materials, no need of air conditioner at all in those houses. Sun will never get into your bedroom from the solar orientation, unlike the coastal belt. Coastal belt, what happens? The house which was ground plus 1 has become ground plus 7. But the ground plus 7 house, without technology, you cannot stay in those houses.
Right.
You need an air conditioner, you need a lift, you need so and so. Your dependency on technology has increased. But in terms of hinterland of Goa, you will realize, and it's something to explore, that dependency on technology is almost zero. And that is where sustainability comes into picture, right?
No, that is so heartening, and it is also surprising that there are places in Goa like that where you don't need an air conditioner, because today, I've already said, just 2 days ago, I was saying to someone, the heat has started and it's really hitting us, So without an air conditioner, to have places with natural cooling is something that we need to pay attention to.
In fact, what happens, technically speaking, we have the Goa Regional Plan.
Right.
And there are these conservation areas. I think it's time to relook at some of these focal points as to how our architectural vocabulary of heritage houses is emerging, is undergoing a change, is transforming for the good, or is under threat from the pseudo language that is coming up all over the place. It's not the real Goa that everybody is still talking about globally in terms of tourism, or what you see in all the social media sites. So it's very important also to go and explore.
Yes.
But this needs a teamwork. This cannot be done only by a social media coming from somewhere. The players like the policy makers, stakeholders, developers, government of course, which is the key point. There are a lot of communities, all have to come forward and contribute to this exercise. And that is where again I am repeating, organizations like this can facilitate in educating the masses, educating the stakeholders, and telling them, yes, Goa is no more just sea and sand, what you mentioned initially in your opening remark. It has to go beyond. Go to any hinterland areas, you will realize that there is a change happening. And with the kind of collapse of maybe, or I will not say closure of mining industry, livelihood is also under threat. So there are chances a lot of home tourism, homestays, agri-based tourism models are coming into all those hinterlands, and that is where I think architectural heritage, is also undergoing a change, because many places like this, what happens, see, on one side we have the resident, which we all are here now, who are the actual owners of the property, who are looking after the maintenance and things like that, and on the other side we have the tourism model, which gives you a revenue generating model, right? But in this case, what happens, where will the money come from for the resident? And that is where the question is, which if I may add, see, without a tourism model, somehow, in today's date, you are not able to maintain that house.
It is very difficult.
Right?
It's
very difficult. So, I'm again picking up on the authorities or maybe the state government also. Every state has got something called Goa Housing Policy. Goa Housing Policy always decides a direction for the type of housing. What should be the methodology? What should be the approach for housing? It's not about just making ground plus 7 houses in whole of Karanzalem or whole of Margao, whole of Bardes, in wherever you are. It's not that. In that Goa Housing Policy, like how you have Prime Minister of India says, at PMO's office, even in the budget speech this year, affordable housing for all, everybody. Madam Nirmala Sitharaman has already said by 23 or 24, everybody will get a house in the country. But is it a reality on ground?
Right.
In Goa, if you see, Goa Housing Policy is leading more towards the building construction industry, which is inclined more towards, critically I would say,
yes,
it is for second home or third home. So in this entire exercise of Goa Housing Policy, how much percentage is actually going for the needy? And that is the question here. So when it boils down to housing, is it housing for needy or housing for greedy, is the question. Right?
Now he is sounding like a poet, housing for the greedy or the needy. Yes,
so,
but it's true.
So it is very important to have a guideline policy saying yes in terms of housing percentages, so and so, which gives you revenue through the TCP or building industry, will be built for so and so kind of ownerships, like the second home, third home, or investment, surplus investments. But there would be another bracket which should also look after through organizations like HUDCO, Housing Board, or any other places, or village hamlets. How do you develop? And this is where a relook at Goa's architectural heritage comes into picture. If you have a dedicated focus on such kind of houses where you're looking after certain focus on heritage homes, how they develop, then there would be automatically financial assistance also will come from the government.
So would this also look into the maintenance of
now,
yeah,
there is a policy which is only linked to tourism. It's like if you are into tourism, you want to exploit it for maybe holiday homes under maybe a boutique or readaptive kind of house, then you will get funding from the government because it is tourism. But question is, are you trying to also look at residents' needs also?
Right.
Right. How does he or he has to every time depend on tourism policy only?
May
Can
I
we look at assisting the local residents also, maybe with some kind of long-term financial assistance, so that house is repaired, maybe the roof is repaired, the leakages are repaired, because his house is deteriorating not because of the quality of construction. He is not able to maintain it because there are several reasons are there, and out of it even infrastructure is also a thing. If you see in certain heritage areas, the plinth of the house is supposed at 0, the road is gone at plus 1 meter.
Yeah.
So there is issue of urban flooding coming there, and
Yes.
because of that there is dampness in a house. And moment dampness comes in any heritage home,
It just
starts cracking, it starts showing up, all the houses. So I think we need to understand both sides and help him as a resident also, of course at a mechanism that they wish to apply, but not only in terms of tourism. It should not be like that. You cannot look at. And I think we also should make this kind of financial assistance policies a little friendly for local residents also.
And accessible,
Accessible,
isn't it?
yeah.
I
Accessible.
was going to say, when I was earlier interrupting Mangesh, that the other day about 2 days ago, I had gone to Miramar and I was sitting in the little, enclosure that they have made, like a garden. And there was a lady who came and we started talking, and she mentioned to me that she used to live in Fontenage. And you could make out she had that Portuguese, the slight accent. It was beautiful, of course. And she shared with me that she used to come to Miramar with all her brothers and sisters and cousins, and she said that the sand was actually white. She said we never ever walked with footwear. And our homes that we have in Fontenage over time has become so bad, it's so difficult to maintain. And because of that, she said, I had to sell it off. And it's so painful, but she was so, the part that she said, which was the best, which I thought was the best, where she said that we have sold it to Goans and, we are going to retain that. Now, she was one of the lucky people that she got a Goan to buy the place. Many times it so happens, not everyone is that lucky. The prices of land, if I want to sell off a plot of land, the average Goan cannot afford the price that I want. And the only people, sad to say, or whatever, is that people from Delhi, Mumbai and places like that who come in and buy the place. And then we say, Goans have gone off, Goans have gone off. But what do you do, Mangesh, in a situation like this?
You see, having seen Panjim city from birth, I can tell you, I was a People's High School student.
Right.
And used to live in Batlem. And I have walked from Chinsolem, Batlem, Portais, Fontaines, and during interval run away to see this Bombay Goa steamer which used to come up to the jetty.
Yes,
which is having a complete different language with the entertainment world on the river Mandovi today. But sometimes I can see a huge change and transformation happening in those areas.
Yes.
And every house is undergoing a change along both. We have walked almost 4 times a day on that stretch. But it's equally important in in any plan, especially for the authorities to go beyond just regulations, just beyond doing change of zones. They have to look at the actual identity. And if somebody comes in with some kind of vision like this, who has got a real knowledge of historic connections of the past and how Goa has got that particular global, branding or a standing in today's date, it's very important to understand that particular vision and then apply it here. Every department or authorities cannot be running around in bureaucratic circles, and making a resident go for its, all over the place,
True.
approvals and things like that.
Yes, absolutely.
And they are, because of this, many residents, my friends and all, have come up in a situation that I am done, enough is enough, I'm selling it to somebody.
Absolutely.
And I will never come back to Goa.
Mangesh, not just one, I know of so many people who have oh my God, no way.
I think something like this needs it's a wake-up call for everybody before it goes out of context, actually.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And if you see the availability of construction materials, and this is where also research labs or some kind of think tank also has to start. Initially, I could count on a laterite stone. Laterite stone was available in Goa. As somebody just mentioned, your friend, about quality of sand. Sand was available in Goa. Today's sand either has to come from Maharashtra or Karnataka, or in Bangalore it comes into a processed kind of sand, right?
Yes.
Because of quarrying, because of environmental issues with the green tribunals, materials are not available.
Not available.
So what happens? Contractors are forced to, or developers are forced to use the so-called pseudo concrete blocks. The temperature inside a laterite home and a concrete block, you see the 2 to 3 degrees of temperature variation. Quality of houses also, like in terms of joinery, in terms of consumption of cement, it's a different ball game. So I think we need to relook at multiple issues like this when it comes to architectural heritage, and not just cosmetic. Survival and standing of those houses also is equally an important issue, and I think all have to come into picture. And I'm sure, I'm glad at your organization you have touched upon a topic like this, where a new emerging Goa is lined up right now. So definition of new emerging Goa is what? Late Manohar Parrikar has always said, this is emerging Goa in terms of investments coming from outside, exploitation of waterfronts for navigational purpose, entertainment purpose, the branding of, the new expressways which are coming up. That has got dominoes effect in the entire thing. Goa is developing. You could earlier stand on a scooter and buy a pav or something else and go back home. But that whole concept is changing. You go along any road, you could stop and buy a vegetable like tamdi bhaji or moya from a local farmer who's there. But today they are not going to be accessible for all this. So there is a transformation.
Yes. And
this is where new emerging Goa is coming into picture, where the think tank of new emerging Goa should start looking at the entire transformation or what Goa's architectural heritage is going through. Please relook at last 50 years of Goa's attitude towards architectural heritage policies and put your foot down and make out policies for next 50 years kind of thing, so that it is restored for generation next. Otherwise you will just see another Gurgaon here all over the place. Yeah.
So I just spoke about the lady who said that they couldn't afford to maintain that. Now maintenance of homes like these are really expensive. What are some of the expenses and what are the things that are required in an old home? Like take an home in Fontainebleau. Over there, they are so beautiful. Every time I walk through, I am like, oh my God, it's so awesome. So how a home like that, to repair it, because those ceilings are really, really high, it must be costing, I can't even imagine what it must be. I'm sure lakhs and lakhs of rupees. So besides the ceiling and the tiles, what are the other parts of the house that would be requiring maintenance and work? And also now, like you said, they're putting in ACs, they're modifying the old houses to adapt to today. So what else would I require to change? What about the plumbing?
Yeah.
Would that also be required to look into?
If you see the level of maintenance schedule for most of this kind of houses, if you go back to the history, you will realize that they were linked to level of maintenance levels. We were linked to the social calendar. Like based on the type of house, they would do pre-Ganesh, pre-Diwali, pre-Christmas or pre-Easter. There was a calendar, pre-monsoon, that levels of maintenance issues will get inserted. The roofing has to be done before monsoon.
Before the rains, yeah.
The flooring has to be done so and so. The wall and the house facade has to be done before pre-December. So there was a calendar. So there were some houses which were regularly getting an attention on annual basis.
Right.
And some on daily basis, like small items are there. But eventually you realize that they were doing it once in 5 years, once in 6 years. And that is where the point is. Some houses never got painted or looked at in terms of even 10 years kind of line, because the families are not here, or because he's having some issues of rental and tenant and things like that. But yes, as you asked rightly, in any architectural Goan house, one is the roofing which comes into picture.
The biggest problem.
Biggest, because people have to walk on it. The issue of termite, which is also happening, because most of the house is locked and kept.
Yes.
Half the time sometimes, because termite also comes into picture. Lot of dampness, especially along the peripheral side, because the drainage is not lined up. So 4 months of excessive rain comes into picture. Because of that, a lot of water seeps into from the plinths, which affects into cracks, plaster showing, peeling of nature. Then there are issues of one tile is broken, and you will find that entire water is dripping through that, either on the walls.
Yes.
The entire wall will
becomes moist, yeah.
Because lime plaster and this is always an issue. Cement can stay, but lime plaster will always start showing bubbles all over the place.
Yes.
Scales coming off. Then second issue is about kind of windows. Either it is kept open half the time, closed half the time. Based on that, the light and ventilation of a house is also there. You must have seen the mosaic that existed, the mosaic pattern tiles that existed earlier in most of the houses. Their biggest enemy is keeping it closed. Moment
Okay.
air is passing through and through, you will not find. Otherwise, you always find some white efflorescent stains coming on it.
Oh.
So people have to basically, see that all these points are also considered in this case. And then last 30 years, you will realize that a lot of insertions have come into heritage homes, like maybe because of growth of siblings,
Yeah.
or because of family divisions. You'll realize that additional washrooms and bedrooms have come.
So you're basically modernizing it
Yes.
and you're extending
Yes.
it. It could
So,
be,
yes.
vertically or horizontally.
Yeah. So
both.
because of that, what is happening is there is a change to the existing house. It's like surgery of an old person also, and then you're
Yes.
trying to re-add and add and add. So I think houses also are going for something like this. Houses also can talk, I may say that. They also have
I'm sure.
a feeling,
Sure.
right? So there is an aging factor for such kind of things. So wood, Mangalore tiles, plaster, and basically flooring, and of course door and window schedules. And many of these houses were linked to a plumbing layout all around, which in terms of stormwater drainage. The well was part of the kitchen. From the
Yes.
kitchen window, I could take the well.
Draw water.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Washrooms are always at a place which you just go for 5 meters outside,
Yes.
up the hill in your fruit park or something like that. So level of maintenance then was completely different. And as you said about high false ceiling, actually cooling is very good in terms of summers. But because of that requirement of that air conditioner,
They put that-
agency,
they put the
he puts a false ceiling.
ceiling.
Because AC depends on the area of cooling.
Right.
Right, so the character is changing there also, and sometimes the false ceilings also don't exist. Don't work appropriately because of leakage. Sometimes a rat goes there
Yes.
top of that. It's difficult. You don't get anybody even to go on the rooftop or change a false ceiling today. And that
Right.
is where I'm saying the new emerging era of training to artisans who would work on old construction practices, old bonding of wood, lime, mosaic, that kind of profession also should be supported, and so that we have somebody to look after all this. Otherwise, easiest solution is demolish the whole thing and do parking plus whatever high story apartment, and that is going to change the entire architectural vocabulary, architectural language. The streets will,
It's not going to be the
yes,
same.
streets will never be the same,
No,
right?
no.
And I think it's also important to look at outline development plans here in such a way that don't blindly show roads which are 10 meter because it will come in the long run. You must have
Can you
seen
explain that to us, to the
most of the
viewers?
heritage areas, whether it is, you must have seen across Europe also, Venice also, streets are 1 or 2 meters. But in today, unlike Goa also, which are like 4 meters, 5 meter max. But outline development plan, before it wants to give permissions and all, they show 10 meter wide proposed widening of the road without even
So
being-
how does that affect the current scenario? What happens?
Because on ground that kind of width never exists. I can do that in Porvorim, I can do that in Old Goa, I can widen the road because there are no encroachments on this. But this heritage areas, I'm not calling them encroachments, they are part of living heritage for us. You cannot consider that they would be demolished at a later date, right? So I think there is a catch in this particular thing where the policymakers who are into outline development plan also have to very sensitively look at these houses and their existence in the plan also. Get them listed. Don't assume that it will be bulldozed once they are old, right? Instead, we should work on mechanism and incentives to them, how to restore it and preserve it for the future generation.
Future generations.
I think that is where I think your organization can play a big role in educating the masses also and reaching to the people also.
You're saying about educating the masses, but I always believe the best place to start is with children. I think our children need to learn the value of the heritage that we have as far as our architecture is concerned. The other things, yes, they are aware, but about architecture, I'm sure you'll agree with me, not many of our children know the value. And I think this is my suggestion. Manguesh is the expert. I'm sure he is going to say a yes or a no to this, is that we should have more trips for children to these areas where they can children learn best when they see something, and if they see it, they understand it. Like they have, there is a place where, I don't know if it is Lotuli or Raya, where they have a Goan house and they have these artisans doing Bigfoot, in Bigfoot, something like that, where children are taken from schools, from colleges. And I think these trips will inculcate that interest, and then we can see where it goes from there. Maybe we'll have many more people like Manguesh who will come and say, no, we have to do something for Goa. Right, Manguesh? So what do you think about this idea? Or do you have any other ideas where we can involve our children?
In fact, you see, in terms of heritage policies, which are looking at, the direction for conservation, like how I said about housing. Similarly, there has to be a think tank which looks after all this also. In terms of
you have mentioned it earlier, and yes, it's a very valid point.
Not only in terms of cosmetic pictures that you see, right? In today's date, if you see an example, I'll give you a Fontaine Street. Sometimes it is gone overboard with the so-called heritage walks which are happening, and I'm sure some of the residents are not even able to enter their own house because either somebody has parked there for hours together. You can't even enter his own home. And people also walk, especially, of course, they are always a welcome as a guest or a tourist, but they need to be also educated in why that particular window was built, why that courtyard was on that so and so. And this goes for both our kids here also, local residents also, our young next generation also, to understand why a courtyard was built, how that house was being built that time. How the whole socio-cultural fabric of maybe, the deity or the entire thing got connected with the social fabric of the whole house. These are the kind of things I think which we should make them understand. The storyline of heritage houses, revival of the past, right? Not only, just take pictures of a shell window and put it on a social media and say, this is the Goa. What goes beyond that lipstick architecture, I call it, I think is something for everybody to look at. And I think the think tank is also basically should, educate a lot of maybe so-called guides or historians, so that, they also have a knowledge and they can guide all these people, in different areas. Maybe sometimes in South Goa, I don't know if you remember, we had Heritage Festival in Malla also sometimes, Fontaine Street.
That was a few years ago.
Years back also. So basically that was to ignite people and understand the importance of all this. So policies like this can always, show. Culturally we are diverse. Last 1,000 years if you go to see, we have different things to, show what we have in terms of cultural heritage. But, it needs right kind of message to all the generations, not only old or the young. And it has to basically emphasize on its existence, its significance, and what it can do for the place for next 50 years.
Right. So sustainability.
The sustainability is basically, not about just doing green. It is a different model altogether, especially the increasing density in most of the areas around heritage houses is multiplied multifold.
Absolutely.
And this you can see in the number of vehicles passing through your tiny road in most of the heritage areas, which is sometimes very bad for even the kind of foundations of the houses also, the walls also, and many issues like this. So I think we need to look at either you do, maybe no pedestrian zone kind of thing, or only a resident can enter, and I think in today's date, because of lack of financial assistance to residents or lack of money to basically even develop on your own, many people are going into readaptive commercial establishments into their houses. Like the front 25% of your facade, I can do it for commercial. I can do a shopping kind of thing. Certain percentages also could be exploited commercially because some revenue has to come, right? Because initially fishing and agriculture was there, but now it doesn't exist. So basically I think when you are giving a commercial approval or a commercial license in heritage areas, we also need to see the effects of all this on the neighboring land uses also, right? Because of the waterfront along the Mandovi river, you'll realize that entire parking comes into Fontaine area or Saint Thome. Where do the resident park? So there has to be a parking policy in terms of infrastructure also, which looks at all this. It has to go beyond.
So
I'm
like
just sharing this.
Mangesh, you rightly said, there is a lot to it. It isn't just this one part or this one part. We have to look at it in its entirety and see how we can help. As Goans, it is not just the job of a few architects or policymakers. I think we all need to contribute. And with all the tips and the information that Mangesh has given, I think this is the best place to start. We start from here and we can take it, I'm sure we can take it really far. Mangesh, that brings us to the end of the session. It has been extremely informative. I've learned a lot. Now every time I pass through Fontainish, I'm going to look and think, why did they build it like this? So you have ignited that questioning spirit, attitude in me as far as the architecture of Goa goes. I hope it has done the same for you. We'd love to hear from you, your suggestions, your comments. Do write to us at planetj@navintimes.com. From all of us at the studio, Mangesh, thank you very much. I'm sure the viewers would like to say thank you to you as well.
Thank you. I wish all of them good health. I look after buildings and buildings' health, but I would always say that health of a person is also equally important, and bad health of a building can, have after effects on your health also. So it is, as architects, social responsibilities. I am there with you for all your initiatives to also look at how health of a building also could be restored and conserved, so that you also have a equally balanced health for post-pandemic times.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the very kind and warm wishes from Mangesh. And to all of you, thank you for watching, for your time, your patience. Like I said earlier, we'd love to hear from you. So do drop us a line sometime. And until next time, take care of yourself. Thank you.